I almost feel like there is an increase in a fervent religiosity that has kind of reemerged that, from my perspective, we haven't seen since the 2000s. And I don't know, your perspective on this. I wanted to know if have you felt that there's been kind of a new religiosity kind of brewing amongst the right that was kind of mute or more secular just a few years prior?
I don't think so. I grew up in a secular elite coastal environment, and it. I say this non-judgmentally. It's just a fact, and it in one sense it is a little bit appalling. In my elite education, I really did not know anybody who was religious, to my knowledge, and these were people at very selective schools. So for me, the big shock was when I moved to New York City in the 1990s and became involved in conservative journalism, conservative thinking, something I'd not been involved with before. I had not been politically oriented in my intellectual life necessarily, although I was a liberal by default, sort of a non-thinking liberal. But that was when I became exposed to the core conservative view and the flagship institutions like National Review or Commentary, and particularly in National Review, experienced for the first time really active religious faith. And again, I find this it's amazing. And if you deplore the secularization of our culture, I'm an exhibit of that. It is truly amazing that I literally do not think I knew anybody who was practicing in their faith up until I was in my 40s or 50s. So to me, that was the time when I became very, very conscious of how frequently claims for conservative thinking, for bourgeois values, for personal responsibility, for the value of civilization were couched in a religious argument. So I'm not really that conscious of things going up and down. And I guess at this point, I would say that the assault on traditional values from the left has become so extreme, so rapid, so utterly radical with the rise of the instantiation of academic gender ideology, with the rise of the fanatical effort to castrate chemically and surgically children in order to produce, sort of accelerate the great replacement. We celebrate non-procreative sex. It's the only type of sex we celebrate at this point with the whole LGBTQ pride. That is so destructive that if it has inspired a corresponding rise in the almost only remaining discourse to fight back against it, which is a religious one, because the left controls the default. They always assume that their changes have become the new norm. It is now the default that you're going to have parents kept in the dark about their child's forced gender conversion in school. And anybody who opposes that, it's the burden on them to oppose it, which is a bizarre control of the valence of our public values. If the only remaining language to oppose that is a religious one, and I think that's unfortunate, but it's a valid point of view. I would like to be able to oppose these sorts of leftist assaults on common sense traditional values from a empirical point of view, from a point of view of understanding human nature, without reference to an allegedly personally loving and all-knowing and all-powerful God. At this point, religion's kind of your only safe harbor. If that's the case, I'm not going to begrudge a rise in religious rhetoric and faith, because somebody's got to push back against the incredible threat that the left poses to the cultural inheritance that we have, and our biological inheritance, frankly.